Writing in 1867, mathematician Georg Cantor wrote, "In mathematics, the art of asking questions is more valuable than solving problems." In today's lesson, we'll consider puzzles where asking the right questions is the whole point of the problem. Let's illustrate the idea by getting right to our lead-off puzzle. We return to the island of knights and knaves, which we introduced in Lesson 4. Let me remind you that on this island, everyone is either a knight or a knave. Knights always tell the truth, and knaves always lie. You can't tell just by looking who's who, so the only way to distinguish the knights from the knaves is to work out the logical consequences of the cryptic remarks that they make. Now, here's the puzzle. Suppose you meet identical triplets named Leon, Larry, and Tim. You don't know who's who, and they look absolutely identical. It's known that Leon and Larry are knaves, note the L for liar, and Tim is a knight, note the T for truth teller. You're allowed to ask one question of one of the brothers. What could you ask that would allow you to determine whether or not you're speaking to Larry? Pause the video here if you'd like to try solving this yourself. Are you ready for the solution? Well, let's see. Our challenge is to determine whether we're speaking to Larry, and we can only ask one question to one of the brothers. Before coming to the correct question, let's explore why some plausible alternatives don't work. What would happen if you asked a random brother, "Are you Tim?" Well, if you're addressing Tim, then he will truthfully answer yes. But if you're addressing Leon or Larry, they will lie and say yes. So all three brothers will say yes, and you've gotten nowhere. Perhaps we'd do better with, "Are you Larry?" This time, Tim will truthfully answer no, while Larry will lie and answer no. But Leon will lie and answer yes. And this is progress. A yes answer tells you for certain that you're speaking to Leon. But if the answer is no, then we only know that we're speaking either to Tim or to Larry. Not good enough. The cool part of this puzzle is what happens if we ask, "Are you Leon?" Now our reasoning plays out just like in the last case. Tim will truthfully say no, and Leon will lie and say no. But Larry will lie and say yes, and we just accomplished our goal. When we ask, "Are you Leon?" a yes answer indicates that you're talking to Larry, and a no answer indicates that you're not talking to Larry. Problem solved. I absolutely love this kind of problem. I just think it's really cool that we can devise questions so clever that we get useful information from the people we're speaking to, even if we have no idea if they're lying or telling the truth. I imagine a lot of parents would love to have that skill when they suspect their kids have been up to some mischief. If you enjoyed our opening puzzle, then here are two more that have a similar flavor. Have a go at solving them for yourself. They both involve the same setup. This time, we only have two brothers, whom we shall call Arthur and Robert. You know that one is a knight and one is a knave, but you don't know which one is which, and you don't know whether it's Arthur or Robert who tells the truth. The first puzzle is this. Suppose you meet one of them while you're out walking one day. What one yes-no question could you ask him to determine his name? And the second puzzle is this. What one yes-no question could you ask to determine whether it's Arthur or Robert who tells the truth? These two puzzles are a bit more complex than our opening puzzle, so be patient as you try to work through the possibilities. As a hint, I'll even tell you that a 3-word question is sufficient for each puzzle. Not the same 3-word question, but a simple 3-word question for each. Put me on pause and see if you can figure these puzzles out. How'd you do? There's an interesting symmetry in the solutions to these two puzzles. Let's focus on Arthur just to make things concrete. To determine whether you're speaking to Arthur, you ask, "Is Arthur truthful?" If you want to determine if Arthur is the truthful one, you ask, "Are you Arthur?" Let's see why this works. What happens if we ask, "Is Arthur truthful?" There are actually 4 possible cases to consider. Let's suppose we really are talking to Arthur. If Arthur is truthful, then the correct answer to the question is yes. Arthur will tell the truth and say yes. But if Arthur is the liar, then the correct answer to the question is no, but Arthur will lie and say yes. Either way, if we're speaking to Arthur, then the answer will be yes. What if we're speaking to Robert? Well, if Robert is truthful, then Arthur is the liar. So the correct answer to the question, is Arthur truthful, is no. Being truthful, Robert will say no. If Robert is the liar, then Arthur really is truthful. So the correct answer this time is yes, but Robert will lie and say no. Either way, Robert will say no. It might help to organize these conclusions into a table. So when we ask, is Arthur truthful, a yes answer indicates that we're speaking to Arthur, and a no answer indicates we're speaking to Robert. Problem solved. The analysis is very similar in the case of the second puzzle. When we ask, are you Arthur, the cases work out like this. Keep in mind that if Robert is the liar, then Arthur must be the truth teller, and vice versa. So we see that a yes answer indicates that Arthur is the truth teller, while a no answer indicates that Arthur is the liar. I like to refer to puzzles of this sort as question puzzles. Their goal is to devise questions that are informative even when you don't know whether you're speaking to knights or knaves. Beyond their recreational value, they also tend to reveal some intriguing philosophical points about the nature of questions. Let me explain what I mean through another puzzle. To set this up, I'll need to remind you of another topic we mentioned in Lesson 4. We say that knights always tell the truth and knaves always lie, but their ability to do so assumes that they have a firm grasp on reality. So, to make these problems more interesting, let's suppose that everyone on the island of knights and knaves is either sane or insane. Everything a sane person believes is true, and everything an insane person believes is false. Let's consider some consequences of this. Suppose you're on the island of knights and knaves, and you ask a random person if cats are mammals. A sane knight will know the correct answer is yes, and that is what he'll say. A sane knave will also know that the correct answer is yes, but he'll lie and say no. An insane knight will believe that the correct answer is no, and he'll say that, believing he's telling the truth. And an insane knave will believe that the correct answer is no, but he'll say yes, believing that he's lying by saying so. Do you see the point? As we discussed in Lesson 4, it looks like sane knights and insane knaves will give the same answer to any yes-no question you ask. How could we ever distinguish between them? Well, that's precisely your puzzle. Suppose you meet a pair of identical twins. One is a sane knight, while the other is an insane knave. What one yes-no question could you ask one of them to determine which one he is? Before you pause the video, let me make a small comment. A moment ago, we gave a pretty convincing argument that a sane knight and an insane knave will always give the same answer to any yes-no question you put to them. That's certainly true for any normal sort of yes-no question that we might ask. The trick is to realize that there are certain questions whose meaning changes depending on to whom they are addressed. Philosophers refer to questions such as this as indexical questions. Perhaps a question of that sort will help us solve our puzzle. Okay, now you can put me on pause. So how do we distinguish sane knights from insane knaves? Well, a simple question that works is, are you a knight? It's the presence of the word you that makes the trick work. By making the meaning of the question dependent on the person to whom the question is asked, we can get around the problem of sane knights and insane knaves behaving the same way. Let's see why. Suppose you ask a sane knight, are you a knight? The sane knight will accurately believe that he's a knight, and then he'll tell the truth by saying yes. Now imagine asking an insane knave the same question. The insane knave will wrongly believe he really is a knight, and will then lie and say no. And just like that, we've distinguished between them. A yes answer means we're speaking to the sane knight, while a no answer means we're speaking to an insane knave. To see if you have the hang of this, see if you can show that the question, are you sane, would also work. Now we come to the absolute slam dunk classic of this genre. This is another of those very famous puzzles that every mathematically inclined person needs to have in her repertoire. It's so famous that you might have heard it before, but even if you have, there might be some new wrinkles that I can show you. We'll refer to it as the heaven-hell puzzle for reasons that will become clear momentarily. Here's the puzzle. You're in a room with two doors. One leads to heaven and the other leads to hell. There are also two guards, one in front of each door. One is a knight and one is a knave, but as always, you don't know which is which. You can ask one yes-no question of one of the guards, after which you must make your decision. What should you ask, assuming, of course, that you would prefer to go to heaven? Take a moment to think this puzzle through if you've never encountered it before. Now, there's actually more than one way to solve this puzzle, so let's look at two, beginning with the one that's most typical. The standard solution is to point to one of the doors and ask one of the guards, if I asked the other guard if this is the door to heaven, would he say yes? Let's consider the possible cases. First, let's suppose you're pointing to the door to heaven. If you ask the knight if you're pointing to the door to heaven, then the knight would truthfully say yes. The knave, knowing this, will lie about what the knight will say and will therefore answer no. If you ask the knave if you're pointing to the door to heaven, then he will lie and say no. The knight, knowing this, will tell the truth about what the knave will say and will therefore say no. In other words, if you're pointing to the door to heaven, then both guards will answer no to your question. Now suppose you're pointing to the door to hell. This time, if you ask the knight if you're pointing to the door to heaven, then he'll truthfully say no. The knave will lie about what the knight will say, and he'll answer yes. If you ask the knave if you're pointing to the door to heaven, then he'll lie and say yes. The knight will then tell the truth about what the knave would say, and he'll therefore answer yes. In other words, if you're pointing to the door to hell, then both guards will answer yes. So a no answer means you're pointing to the door to heaven, and a yes answer indicates you're pointing to the door to hell. Problem solved. As I said, that's the usual answer. It's quite ingenious, since you feel like you're tricking the guards into revealing the correct door. There's an alternative approach to the heaven-hell puzzle. Here's another question that works. Is the knight guarding the door to heaven? Let's see why this works. This time, let's start by assuming that you're addressing the guard who's guarding the door to heaven. If you're speaking to the knave, then the correct answer to, is the knight guarding the door to heaven, is no. And the knave will lie about this by answering yes. If you're speaking to the knight, then the correct answer is yes, and the knight will truthfully give this answer. And what if you're addressing the guard who is guarding the door to hell? Well, this time, if you're speaking to the knave, then the knight really is guarding the door to heaven. So the correct answer is yes, and the knave will lie by saying no. But if you're speaking to the knight, then the correct answer is no, and the knight will truthfully give that answer. So a yes answer indicates that you're speaking to the person who is guarding the door to heaven, while a no answer indicates that you're speaking to the person who is guarding the door to hell. Again, problem solved. Now, as with all things related to knights or knaves, puzzles of this sort were brought to a high art by Raymond Smullyan, whose name we've encountered before. I'd like to devote the remainder of our time today to a different sort of puzzle he devised that he referred to as coercive logic. As always, we'll illustrate the idea with a warm-up exercise. Suppose we're playing a game in which I get to ask you a question and you promise to answer truthfully. How would you respond to the question, will you either answer no to this question or pay me $100? Think about that question for a moment. Since it's an or question, it's asking if you will do at least one of two things. 1, answer no to this question, or 2, pay me $100. So to answer truthfully, you must do one of these two things. Now let's consider your possible answers. If you answer no, then you've actually done item 1 on our list. But by carrying out one of the items on the list, you've ensured that the truthful answer to the question is yes. The question asks if you'll do one of two things, and then you actually did one of them. That means that by answering no, you've broken your promise to answer truthfully. And that means you cannot answer no to my question. It follows that you must answer yes. But if you answer yes, then you've not carried out the first item on the list. So your answer can only be truthful if you act so as to make the second part true. But that means you'd better give me $100. This is why Smolian called this an example of coercive logic. There was something about my question and your promise to answer truthfully that forced you to behave in certain ways. Let's explore some other examples. Suppose you're at a restaurant and you must choose between chicken and fish for dinner. The chef offers you the following deal. He says, make a statement. If the statement is true, then you can have the chicken. But if the statement is false, then you can't have the chicken. As it happens, though, you actually want to have the fish. What statement could you make to compel the chef to give you the fish? Take a few moments to work that out. Okay, we're challenged by a chef to make a statement. If the statement is true, then we'll have the chicken for dinner, but if it's false, then we will not be allowed to have the chicken. The challenge was to make a statement that would compel the chef to give us the fish. A statement that works is, you will give me neither chicken nor the fish. If we decide that the statement is true, then the rules say the chef must give us the chicken. But if he gives us the chicken, then he will have made the statement false, and that's a contradiction. Therefore, we must assess the statement as false. To make the statement false, the chef must either give me the chicken or the fish. But the rules say that for a false statement, he's not allowed to give us the chicken. Therefore, the only way the chef can follow his own rules is to give us the fish. Here's a variation on that puzzle. Suppose you're very hungry and actually want both chicken and fish. What statement could you make this time? I'll let you take a stab at it before giving the solution. So now we want a statement that will force the chef to give us both the chicken and the fish. This time we can make the statement, you will not give me the chicken unless you also give me the fish. Let's see if we can assess that statement as false. Well, the only way the statement can be false is if the chef actually gives us the chicken, but then doesn't give us the fish. So if we assess the statement as false, then the chef must give us the chicken. But the rules say the chef cannot give us the chicken for a false statement. So this scenario is ruled out. So we have to assess the statement as true. But for a true statement, he's obligated by his own rules to give us the chicken. But if the statement is true, and if he gives us the chicken, then he must also give us the fish as well. Problem solved. Now that we're warmed up, let's consider what Smolian calls the ultimate in coercive logic. This is another of those puzzles that I just absolutely love. I think it's so ingenious that even after having worked through the solution about 100 times, it still has the power to make me smile. Let's see what you think. Here's the puzzle. Suppose I offer you $1 million to answer either yes or no, and you have the option of answering either truthfully or falsely. In other words, you may either tell the truth or lie at your pleasure. Would you agree to play this game? It sure seems safe enough, doesn't it? I mean, what could I possibly ask that it could impose any burden on you? So there you go. Would you agree to play this game or not? Of course, if you smell a trap coming, then maybe not. But what could the trap possibly be? Mull that over and I'll walk you through this puzzle in a moment. Okay, so here's the setup. I'm to ask you a yes-no question. You can answer either truthfully or falsely at your whim, and I will pay you $1 million for doing so. The question was whether or not you should agree to play this game. If you intuited that you should decline to play, then your intuition is correct. But what could the trap possibly be? Well, the problem is that actually you're not quite allowed to answer randomly. It's required that your answer either be true or false. And that might be a problem when you try to answer the following question. Will you either truthfully answer no to this question, or falsely answer yes, or pay me $2 million? Let's analyze this. Once again, this is an or question. That means I'm asking if you'll do at least one of three things. 1, you'll truthfully answer no. 2, you'll falsely answer yes. And 3, you'll pay me $2 million. Let's be very clear. If you respond in a way so that one of these three items is actually carried out, then you will have answered truthfully. But if you respond in a way so that none of these three items is actually carried out, then you will have answered falsely. So how can you respond? Well, suppose you decide to falsely answer yes. Then you will have carried out item 2 on the list. But that means that the truthful answer to my question really is yes. After all, I asked if you would do one of three things, and then you went ahead and actually did one of those three things. So you failed in your attempt to falsely answer yes. In attempting to falsely say yes, you answered truthfully in spite of yourself. And that means it's impossible to falsely answer yes. Could you instead truthfully answer no? Sadly, you cannot. If you truthfully answer no, then you will have carried out the first item on the list. But having carried out one of the items on the list, you've ensured that the truthful answer to the question is yes. One more time, I ask if you will do one of the three things, and then you went and did one of those three things. Just as before, in attempting to truthfully say no, you answered falsely in spite of yourself. And that means it's impossible to truthfully answer no. What does that leave? Well, you could truthfully answer yes, but to answer truthfully, you must act in a way that ensures one of the three items actually occurs. But in this scenario, neither of the first two items actually occurs. You did not truthfully answer no, and you did not falsely answer yes. So your only option is to pay me $2 million. And if you falsely answer no, well, by falsely answering no, you're actually affirming that you will do one of those three items. But in this scenario, again, neither of the first two items actually occurs. So once more, you had better pay me $2 million. Basically, when a logician challenges you to a game that looks like a sure winner, I suggest you decline to play. And with that advice, I think we're done for the day. See you next time.